Welcome to Why Is This a Podcast? I'm your host, Kieran Watts. On this episode of Why Is This a Podcast, I'm delighted to have a author whose new book, Your Second Phase, you can get now, and a coach and change strategist to talk to about these issues, particularly about the menopause, the wonderful Kate Usher.
Hi there.
Kate, hello.
Hello. It's lovely to be
Hello.
here.
Thank you so much for being here. How are you?
Yeah, I'm very well. Thank you very much.
How's your experience of COVID-19, the pandemic, lockdowns? How's that been for you?
It's very unusual. It has to be said. It's starting to get very boring now. I'd really like to go out and meet more people. Um, but it's I'm very lucky. I live in a very lovely place in the world, and I and with my family. So it's fine. It's fine, and I am doing a lot better than many, and I am grateful for that.
And you've, published a book.
Yeah, I
Oh,
did just as we went into our very first lockdown. I published my book, Your Second Phase, and that's what's brought us here today.
it is what's brought us here today, and that's interesting. So I want to ask you first about sort of your position. You're a coach and change strategist. Um, but why is that important as a position, and how do you operate in that position?
Okay, so primarily, I work with organizations, and within that, I work with women and I work to empower them through their menopause to take ownership of it and to come out the other side in a powerful position. And I also work with managers within organizations to help them create bespoke strategies that enable menopausal women and then lastly, I also create programs that take those strategies and make sure that they actually become part of the way that organizations work and how they treat women um, throughout this phase of life. And first of all, it's important because creating awareness is the cornerstone of creating change about anything that is unusual from our own experience. So, um, as much as menopause is a woman's experience in itself, because of the nature of menopause and how long it goes on for and the severity of symptoms, it's actually a societal issue because women can't have a day off. They can't leave their symptoms at the gate and go to work. They come with them all the time. And therefore, you I can guarantee at some point will have interacted with a menopausal woman indirectly. So it's part of what we all will need to deal with at some time. So creating awareness and empathy and understanding is the cornerstone of that. And then you can create conversations around the subject. And then it starts to flow from there. So you can then start to have it as part of the way that an organization works.
It's something that's because I'm a cisgender man, um, so obviously menopause is not something I'm ever gonna have to go through. So it's obviously important for me to be aware of how it affects people and like the women in my life and how it affects me by extension.
Yep.
So it is incredibly important because people are like, oh man, they're just menopausal and they use it as kind of like a punchline. and that's not fair.
No.
I don't think. I don't think it's fair when people use like menopause as a punchline,
I
because
com-
it's really not. It's really it's something that just happens to people. It happens to women. Um, it's just I find it heartbreaking actually that women, you know women do experience that kind of stigma because of menopause. And I'll be honest with you, I've, you know, done the same thing. I've used menopause as a stigma, and I do genuinely regret doing it because it was wrong for me. To do that, um, and it speaks to this broader issue of inclusion. And I want to come on to that, if I may, and we're going to come back on to menopause in a bit more detail in a bit.
Mhm.
Um, but from your career, um, you're very interested in, very engaged with promoting equality, diversity, inclusion as an LGBTQ man. That's something that's very important to me.
Mm.
So I'm really glad that you know shit hot on that. Um, but why are those issues so important to you, and why are they important to you? Why should they be important to everybody?
Well, we live in a diverse world, first of all. And in our communities, there are people from every ethnicity and from every perspective, and not just male, female, every gender identity and sexual preference and disability. We are a vast and varied group of people, and we live together in communities, we work together in communities. And because of that, our workplaces should they should reflect the communities that we live in. They should uh, be an extension of the places we live and how we live. And I think it's vitally important that we do. And there's lots of very good reasons for that. And that's because in the situation that the world's in at the moment, we need different perspectives. We need the creativity. We need the ingenuity. We need the ability of the most brilliant minds that we can obtain and get into our workplaces, and not just have a very narrow view of what's right and who should be the manager, who should be the exec, who should be the chairperson. We need that breadth of thinking in order to create the solutions that we need in order to come out of this situation in a positive way.
And
And
and also, of course, recognizing the fact that the pandemic hits people disproportionately. It hits women disproportionately. It hits members of the LGBT community disproportionately, different racial groups disproportionately, and people, who are poorer
yep,
disproportionately. It's that.
yep.
Oh,
The
and
div-
that's horrific,
Mm,
frankly.
the haves and have-nots in societies are the gap is widening, and we need to consciously create inclusive workplaces. We need to consciously ensure that we have diverse workplaces, and that we have to consciously ensure that we give people equality of opportunity and support them through this process.
I want to come back to menopause, if I may.
Yeah.
Um, you state it's it's a fact of female life, or women will have one.
Yep.
But despite the fact that menopause is universal, throughout women, there's still a lot of stigma attached to it. Why is that? Why is that stigma there?
Okay, so we've got decades, if not centuries, of taboo and stigma around this subject. So if I go back to my childhood in the 70s and even in the 80s, possibly even the 90s, every single older woman joke, every single mother-in-law joke is aimed at menopausal women rather. We are difficult because the symptoms make us unpredictable. We do get cross, we do cry because you have mood swings. And many of those jokes are aimed at from the perspective of age as well. So we have a perspective of menopause being an old woman's thing. And that comes because we're only 3 generations away from the first generation of women to get to the menopause en masse. So if you were born in 1900, you were the first generation of women to actually be guaranteed to get past your menopause. So proportionally, women were pretty old by the time they got to menopause because they either were very lucky to live that long or their life expectancy wasn't much longer than that. But now that is not the case. We've got at least another 30 years, and we've probably got from the point at which we start our symptoms on average, we've got probably another 20 years of career. So we've got another career all over again. So the difference is that we've got outmoded and outdated perspectives that are working in today, and that needs to change. And that will be the same for the LGBTQ plus community as well, that there are very outmoded and offensive perspectives that are being applied in today's society, and it's not acceptable.
I think you just answered that. My next question. I think you answered that pretty much, but just because a woman is going to know more about this than me.
Not necessarily.
But what do we get wrong about menopause? What do we get wrong?
Okay, so
Society,
what does society get wrong about menopause? Well,
the society get wrong.
yeah. Well, first of all, we don't talk about it. It's considered something that should be spoken about in the shadows, and women should manage stoically on their own and put up and shut up, basically. Well, that's just not going to wash anymore. And also, as I've said, we have a perception of it being an older woman's thing. Well, the average age that women are going to start experiencing symptoms is somewhere between the age of 45 and 55. Yet every single image that we see of a menopausal woman is a woman who's 65. Now, if you ask a 45-year-old woman if she feels 65, that it's highly unlikely that she's going to feel it's fair that she's represented by a woman who's 20 years her senior. So the average age of menopause is 51 in this country, but 1 in every 100 women has their menopause before the age of 40. So it's huge. I mean, this is a big issue for society, but because we've had this situation where we've been able to sweep it under the carpet for so long, we've enabled these taboos, these stigmas, these jokes, these things that people say regularly about menopausal women. We've enabled that. But now what's happening is women are saying, no, I'm absolutely not going to accept that. I'm not going to accept that anymore. So it's a case of understanding that this isn't an old woman's thing. This is a societal perception. and it is about every woman and every man and the whole of society is going to have to face up to what the menopause is.
When you were saying that, it was kind of making me think about my experiences as you know, because you mentioned about the LGBTQ plus community, and making me think about that, and thinking that, you know, there are parts of my experience that I don't talk about, and oh, part of my experience that people don't talk about, and you know, you have to talk about it because you've got to prepare people for it, because every girl in effect is going to have to at some stage is going to have to prepare for the menopause,
Yep,
and they're going to have to prepare for what that means for their health, and
yep,
their health physically and emotionally, mentally, psychologically. And it's a thing of um, making sure they know it's not something to be ashamed of. It's just, you know, I don't want to talk for women here. I don't want to talk for girls or women here. I,
it's
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 not
it
my place.
it's just part of life, and it's essential that we do have that communication, so we start to talk about it in a modern, more acceptable way, and we talk about it at the dinner table, we talk about it at the meeting table, we talk about it at the, meeting our friends in a cafe, at the cafe table, or at the bar. We we have to have these conversations so that we can prepare each other when we get there, because most women don't have, and I was one of them, don't have any idea about what actually can happen and how severe this can be, or how some women just sail through. The variability of this is completely unknown to most women, and the fact that there's over 40 symptoms. Women, I mean, most of us turn up at this phase of life knowing that there's probably about 5. Um, so when it does start coming, we kind of think, oh my gosh, what's happening? We're going mad. So it's, something's really wrong. I'm really ill. And it's almost a relief to be told that you're menopausal and that this is a phase of life that you're going through.
So and the stereotyping as well. For me, it's almost like because I've got experience with mental health issues, and it makes me think back to you know, going through puberty, and you know, people saying, "Oh, that's just your hormones
Hmm.
during puberty," and you know, I knew it wasn't, but it's sort of like getting people to know, you know, it's okay to have these side effects, to have these effects of what your body's going through, um, at this difficult time of your life, and that's where I don't know if I'm just misinterpreting everything you're saying.
No, I think that's a very fair comment. I think creating a parallel to your experience when you were going through puberty, how confusing it is, how difficult it is, and how your hormones affect you in more ways than is obvious, and that it also has a chain reaction on lots of other parts of your well-being. And I think that it's the menopause. No, I mean, what the difficulty is that puberty, everyone has an expectation that teenagers are going to be difficult, that there's going to be some door slamming, some shouting, and there's going to be all sorts of other things going on. But at the other end, when women come to menopause, there's no acceptance that there's going to be any shouting, door slamming, or tears, and there's no understanding of what's at the other end and how that the wide-ranging impact on your well-being and your long-term health. So it's yeah, I see there's absolutely a parallel there. And what's happening for women is that their hormones are going from the place that so when you're in puberty, all of your hormones come in, and then in menopause, all of your hormones go out again. So you return to somewhere similar to your prepubescent hormonal levels. So it's hugely traumatic on your body, and lots of things change.
I want to ask you about the book, the new book, the second phase. I don't have a copy of it with me. I'm sorry.
That's
Um,
okay.
but it's a survival guide of sorts. What motivated you to write the book?
I wrote it because I had an horrific menopause, and at the age of 46, I woke up one night. There was no preamble. I woke up and I thought I was going to self-combust, and that was my first night sweat, and they never stopped. And I collected about 27 27 symptoms. They just kept coming and coming and coming. And they took me to a very, very dark place indeed. And when I started my menopause 7 years ago, there was nothing said. Nobody was talking about the menopause other than Woman's Hour on BBC Radio 4. Um, and uh, and it was a very lonely place indeed. But I learned from a very good friend of mine that um, she's a public health expert, and she took me to the chemist when she realized that I was in a pretty bad way, and she filled my wire basket with loads of vitamins and minerals, and she told me what each one would do. And at that point, I realized that it's not necessarily, I may not be able to control the symptom, but I can control what happens next. I have control to my response. I have control of what I do. And therefore, I started to work on that. And that was my way out. That was my way of gaining control back in this situation. And 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 I recognized that the menopause is not just about me, it's about my relationships at home, it's about work, how I manage it in the workplace. And nobody was talking about that either. And I just thought, well, if I need to know, everybody needs to know how to do this. And the book has got sections that you can give to your partner, that you can give to your manager, that you can give to your colleague or your peer or your team members, so that you don't even need to have that sort of this is what's going on position. You can just hand the book over and they read it, and then they can give it back to you. But equally, one of the important things for me is it's not just about how bad menopause can be and how to create strategies to get through this. It's also about that in your second phase, you are incredibly powerful. You're stepping into this position of incredible focus and drive and determination, and it's important that women start to recognize that that's on the other side of this, so that it's not all bad. It's actually an empowering phase to get you through into something that's pretty amazing.
I want to ask you about the workplace, companies, and why it's important for companies to introduce sort of policies to empower women going through the menopause, and a bit more broadly how we raise awareness of the issues that face women um, in the workplace.
So it's important that we create policies and guidelines for organizations, because without them, we'll be bumbling along, not really knowing what we're doing. But it's the issue here is that more and more women are in the workplace than there have ever been. In fact, women aged over 50 are the highest rate of employment growth in this country. So it's becoming an increasing issue that there are more and more menopausal women in the workplace. Equally, there are more of us in senior positions than there have ever been before, and more women wanting to gain support so that they can hold on to their career. And with that, we need to train managers in how to have these conversations, and we need to support them while they're doing that, because of all the reasons we've already discussed around taboo and stigma and discomfort, and not knowing how to discuss something that we haven't really discussed before. Managers need to be supported through this. And one of the ways of doing that is to have policies and guidelines that outline exactly what it is that organizations offer women to enable them to get through this. Now, some women will, with a little bit of assistance, will manage to get through this without any problems, but some women will need considerable assistance because it can be detrimental and completely life-changing, like mine was. And it's about knowing what adjustments can be offered. It's knowing how frequently to meet, if there are medical support mechanisms and psychological support mechanisms, if there's groups within the organisation, if there are advocates within the organisation, and all of that is, if it's defined in a policy, managers know how to provide it, and women know how to access it. And that is really, really important, because Vodafone released some research a couple of weeks ago now, and 15% of their workforce is women of menopausal age, and they recognize the value of their female cohort. They recognize that they want to be the employer of choice, because how you treat menopausal women defines whether or not you have women in your senior management structures. And if you don't, then the young women who are coming up and into your organization take one look at your board, they take one look at your execs, they take one look at your senior management and say, there's no women, this is not the organization for me. And they go on and they go to a different organization. That is an incredible loss to every single company that is choosing to work in that way. So it's very, very important that we start to recognize the value of women and put processes in that enable us to support women through this, and then they can mentor the next generation of women as they come up and through. And because the cost of training and nurturing anyone through an organization right up to that senior level is considerable, and to lose that because you're not supporting women at that time of their life is an incredible waste of resources. So it feeds itself. It becomes really important that we start to recognize women and the contribution that they make, so that they can bring women into the organization and keep that going, so that as Vodafone have found, that they can be an employer of choice.
Well, but, obviously the loss of, potential. I'm a son of I'm a child of a family of working women, and God knows that they're so much more competent than me in many aspects. And my mother, my grandmother, they're my role models, and I love them deeply, and they're incredibly good at. My grandmother's retired, and my mother continues to work. But yeah, it's a great thing of, it's activating potential, I
Yeah.
suppose, is the need of the hour to activate people's potential. Obviously, to activate that potential, I'm a man. I'm a man. I've got a responsibility.
Yep.
Yeah, I've got a responsibility to support women in the workplace, to support women in my community, women in my society, um, menopausal or not. I've got that obligation. We've seen that in the, obviously we're recording this on in the wake of the Sarah Evart
Yeah.
um, scandal.
Yeah.
I've got that responsibility on me.
Yeah.
How how best do I fulfill that responsibility?
I think if we, well, as far as menopause is concerned, or as a wider societal responsibility towards women, as a wider societal responsibility towards women, I think it's about calling out to other men when they behave in a way that is not acceptable, when they behave in a way that is in any way detrimental to women, or in any way that is dangerous to women. And I think we all, men and women, have a responsibility for doing that. So, guys shouting from scaffolding on building sites at young girls as they walk past, that's not acceptable. And it needs to be pointed out, and it needs to be called out and dealt with. And they are looking at having misogyny as a hate crime, and they're looking to make that law later this year, not before time. But I think as
The fact that misogyny isn't a hate crime is despicable.
it is, absolutely. And I think that as far as menopause is concerned, it is about increasing awareness and understanding that many of the sort of social constructs that we've had around menopause are based on very outdated, outmoded perceptions, and they are now veering on fiction, and they're extremely damaging to women. And um, we wouldn't speak to our mothers like that. So why is it okay to speak to other women like that? And that's the way that we have to look at it. We respect and love the mothers in our family, and our grandmothers, and that all women are someone's mother, grandmother, sister, auntie, all of those sorts of things. And we need to show a level of empathy and awareness and understanding that this is basically just another phase of life, and that some women do very much need some additional support. And in order to support those women, it's about enabling that conversation without fear that women are going to talk about some of the more socially uncomfortable subjects, because generally they don't want to talk about it. They just want someone to help and enable them to carry on with the life that they've worked so hard to achieve. And I think that that's very important, that we start to recognize that women don't want to have that kind of conversation. They want some support so they can continue with their lives. And um, as a society, we need to empower them to do that, because the benefits will be felt across our society.
Exactly, and it's not about patronizing women. It's about empowering them.
Absolutely.
That's, you know. Kate Usher, thank you so much for being here.
You're very, very welcome. Thank you so much for asking me.
It's lovely to see you. It's been such a joy, and it's been an eye-opening conversation for me as a man, and who doesn't have lived experience of women's health issues, but who's, you know, as I said, the son of sort of a female dominant family. Um, and it's so um, eye opening, so educating to have that perspective on women's issues, on issues that I'm never gonna have to experience myself personally, but may well, with the loved one, experience myself. So thank you so much.
Oh no, you're very, very welcome. Thank you for inviting me to speak on your podcast. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Your second phase is available now. Kate Usher, everybody. Join us next time.